Hello, everybody. Good light coming from the window today. It's very nice. Hopefully, you've all been able to work with your groups to sort of talk through a little bit of what we've been doing with the Theater of the Absurd. If not, please make sure you do that, right? This is a very important thing to do with groups, to actually talk about with other people, right? This kind of theater really is all about lots of people giving lots of ideas and sort of figuring out how we're all feeling about this, right? Yes, it is an individual kind of theater where, you feel what you feel and you see what you see on stage. But there is also a collective part of this where we sort of talk about collectively how we have seen and felt and interpreted all of these things. And this week we are looking at Endgame. Hopefully you've seen at least through the first half of the book, right? The play. I'm not giving you necessarily a specific stopping point this week. Halfway through, about to the part where Ham sort of starts his first big story about running into the child and having to negotiate with the child, and keeping the kid with him. But overall, right, over the next 2 weeks, we are looking at Endgame. We're taking this one a little bit slow, yes, but that's really because this is our first big dive into the Theater of the Absurd, and it's helpful to maybe take this a little bit slower, to ease into it. Let's talk a little bit about what this is going to be and how we are going to sort of negotiate again, right? If you were able to see some of Waiting for Godot last week, look at it, read through it a little bit with your group. Wonderful, right? That gives you an idea of sort of what we're leaning into, and the sort of things that we're going to be talking about as far as the Theater of the Absurd is concerned. But one thing, of course, that we will want to deal with as well is the fact that as we continue looking at this kind of theater, we have to contend with the notion that Martin Esslin really puts out there, that this is a theater that is very often devoid of explanations, official explanations, right? When Beckett was ever asked about his plays, he was consistent in his insistence that there really was not anything to explain, right? He'd written what he'd written, the characters said what they had said, and however you felt about it was how you felt about it, right? That he didn't feel like he had much to give. He didn't feel he had much to say, and that he didn't need to give much in the way of an explanation. That is, of course, the kind of the thought question for the week, that you're going to be discussing with your group. Specifically, right, whether an author like a Beckett, when they produce a play like this, when they produce something that's so odd and so inexplicable, really, does the author owe some sort of an explanation to an audience? This is kind of what I'm trying to do. This is kind of what I'm trying to say. Or is it better for an author to simply say, look, I wrote what I wrote, you take it and do what you want? In a way, right, does an author have a need or an obligation to tell you about what's going on? Or does this particular author not necessarily have that obligation? And on the flip side, does an author have the right to tell you what the play is about and how you should be feeling about it? Or is that entirely within the purview of the audience, right? This goes back to a concept that's commonly referred to as the death of the author. That once an author produces a work, there is very little that they can then do to tell you how to feel about it, right? They lose control of it. They have birthed it into the world, if you will, and it no longer really, not that it doesn't belong to them, but the interpretation no longer belongs to them, right? We see this, I think, in real life a lot, where, for example, when we say something, it is interpreted. and certainly we can then say, hey, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean to say what you think I mean to say. But some people will always believe that that's what you meant to say, right? You kind of lose control of what happens once you speak. And so that's going to be our thought question this week, really. That in addition to sort of looking at this play, trying to figure out how we feel about this play, do we feel like we deserved more, right, from Beckett, in his presentation of this play? So, this first video, a little bit of introduction, talking a little bit about the thought question. We're going to, in the next video, talk a little bit more about Beckett himself. We're going to be talking a little bit about the Martin Esslin PDF, because we are supposed to as well this week take a little bit of a look at the section that he's written about Beckett, right? Because he describes exactly what he sees in Samuel Beckett for the Theater of the Absurd. And he talks about a lot of the plays. He talks about Waiting for Godot, he talks about Krapp's Last Tape, he talks about Endgame, but he also talks about some of the origins and some of the genesis of Beckett's need to write in French before he writes in English. So I will talk about that in the next little section.